What's up, everyone? I am so excited to be back today with somebody who has actually been on the show. I was looking at the dates nearly 2 years ago, which seems crazy because I feel like we just met, yet we've lived life alongside each other for a while now. And it's so sweet to bring you back to the show, Justin, not only for what God has evolved in your own life, but also through your specific message. And so it's going to be so good. If you guys don't know Justin Roethlingshoefer, you might have met him at FounderCon last year. You can still get access to all of his incredible wisdom that he dropped on stage in our app right now. But Justin, you've got your own podcast, you've got many books, but this particular book that we're bringing you in today, I'm so pumped because it's truly a God ordained and for such a time as this message. So let's jump in.
I love it, Tamara. It's crazy to believe that it's 2 years ago
Right?
that the show was done. And I think our relationship precedes that by even about 6 to 8 months. And
Yeah.
so it's like approaching 3 years,
Yeah.
and wild to think that we just met in person for the first time about 4 or 5 months ago, whatever
I
that was now.
know. I know. I love that though. There's nothing sweeter than like having online friends, and then it's so simple when you get together
Yeah.
because there's no expectation. It's just like, oh yeah, we already know each other, but I actually have proximity now. So it's been really special. And I think that's a stewardship element too, right? Of like, how do you actually serve relationships that are being cultivated virtually so often now? There's seems to be this filter, but there doesn't have to be. I think it's just a matter of truly being authentic with one another.
100%. And I just want to honor your journey too, because like looking at the evolution of everything that you've done and being willing to steward it and step up and really be the vessel that God's using in a multitude of ways, and being willing to shift, being willing to move, being willing to change names, being willing to do a bunch of different things. And I think it's symbolism of God elevating and promoting you to what it is that calling is because at the end of the day, he does change your name when he calls you by name. And so it's a
So
symbolism of
good.
what you're leaning into and what you're doing.
Thanks, brother. I think it's just an element of consistency, which has been a huge part of your journey. And so, if you guys have not yet got word on the street that there is a new book out that you have to get, it's called The Power of Ownership. And the subtitle is what truly like encapsulates so much of who I am, but the intense need for the church to get on board with this conversation. So while you might be listening and you're like, oh gosh, another religious thing. No, like this is not that. It's truly for the vessels that are meant to carry something big. And you have a massive mantle with this message. And so I want, before we even get into the subtitle, before we get into the concept of the book, will you allow people into that secret place of what happened just like days before this book, which was already written, was to be submitted? Because I think it's really profound.
Yeah, so I had come up with the concept of this book probably 2 years ago, and I was sitting with John Gordon, and we were sitting and talking at his house. I still remember we were watching the Texas-Alabama football game on a Saturday afternoon after he worked me in pickleball, and we're sitting there. And he's asking me to explain what we do within Own It. Like, talk to me about this. Like, because he had just gone through it. Catherine had just gone through it, his wife.
Yep.
And he goes, talk me through like a little bit about what the vision is, like what's happening, what's going on. And so I talked to him. I said, it's all about like taking ownership of your health, personalizing it, true N of one solutions, understanding what's happening inside your body and not worrying about what everybody says is the best workout plan or the best diet or the best supplement or the best sleep routine or the best protocol, but rather what is the best for you. And the only way we know that is if we understand your data, understand your information, understand you from the inside out, and we have something quantifiable to ultimately go off of, to allow data to drive direction and data to determine decisions. And as I went down this road, he's like, that's your book. He goes, that's your book. He's like, it's like true ownership and own it of your health. Like that's what this book is. And so I went home from this trip and I started to outline it on the plane, and it kind of sat there for a little bit. And then about a month later, John's name popped up in my email inbox, and it was he'd made an introduction to Wiley Public. And we had a conversation. It was like 45 minutes. And then about an hour after that, I had a contract in my inbox. Like that's the speed of which it moved. And just honor to John for being willing to pull people forward. But I say all that and I preface that because for the next 6 months, I'm struggling and battling with what to do with this book. And so I put this outline together. I send it to John. John sends me an email back. It has literally three words in it. He goes, too many things. He goes, and then underneath it said a lot of first time like major book authors try to put so much into a single book that it doesn't actually get across what you're trying to do. And so he goes, break it down. And so I broke it down, found one concept, I started writing, and I felt so good. And 5 months later, I've got this finished product. 5 days, Tamara, before the editorial deadline that Wiley placed on me.
Yeah.
And so I finished the book. And as I'm sitting there, I was about to hit submit, hit send, and my wife goes, "Hey, Justin, let's go celebrate your book." I was like, "Hey, babe, I just got to get this off." And she's like, "No, no, no, no. Like, you can send it tomorrow. Like, you're done. It's awesome. Just come and celebrate." And I was like, "Okay, fine." So we celebrated, and I went to bed that night, and I woke up at middle of the night.
Yeah.
And I just had this deep discernment and heard this voice of, that's not the book I told you to write. And I get emotional just thinking about it because it gives me goosebumps still. And I'm just like, no way, like, no way. Like, this is 5 months of work. And I'm like, pulling this information out and making it go and making it process is like, it's difficult at times and it's frustrating at times. And then when it flows, it feels good. And I can't tell you how many plane rides it took because I write really well on the plane because there's nobody can get a hold of me. And I actually took a flight just to finalize my final chapter.
Awesome.
It's like,
I gotta go somewhere.
I'm just, send me to Atlanta and back. Like, that's it. I just round trip just to get it
That's
done in a day.
awesome.
And when I woke up in the morning, I was like, nah, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. I'm just going to submit it anyways. Like, not happening. Well, I couldn't hit submit all day. And I went to bed that next night at like 9 o'clock, and I woke up at 11:45. And I knew, like, this isn't the book you were supposed to write. And what had happened was I was battling between trying to write it for the faith-based audience or write it for the secular world. And it was this teeter-totter effect of like, well, do I take ownership of this and do I step into this, or how deep do I go? What do I start to give story-wise? And not only did I start to battle that, but the book became about me and not about the people I was writing it for. And at 11:45, I woke up, I went off, I printed the entire book out, all 12 chapters, and I laid it out on this big 10 by 12 marble table we have in the kitchen, and I just started looking at it. And I grabbed sticky notes, and I went to work. And I just literally started cutting, pasting, crossing out, making notes on stickies, placing them there. I had a whiteboard that had like rearranging of like what the whole the whole structure of the book was. And it was just like I got in this flow state in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden, Elise gets up at 7 a.m. She comes out. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Do not open a door. Do not breathe. Do not allow wind to blow, because I've just got sticky notes everywhere and I'm going to lose everything." And it's just loose papers. So anyways, Tamara, 4 days later, and about, I would say, probably close to 48 hours of just constant work, I had this brand new book. And the funny way God works is that not only did I have a brand new book, but I also had my next two completed in that process. And so with the power of ownership, it's a book that is can go into both the secular world and the faith-based world. When you read the book, you're going to go, Justin's a Christian. Justin loved Jesus. This is amazing. This book speaks to me through him. But at the end of the day, sitting it down in JP Morgan or sitting it down in Keller Williams or sitting it down in some place like that, the place that they need to hear this message and have it resonate, nobody's going to bat an eye. Nobody's going to have an issue. And it allows people to come in and ask that next question of, where did you get this from? Where did you hear this from? Where did you get this download from? Where was this quote from? And then it's, well, thank you. Let me tell you.
Yes, it's so good. That invitational piece is so critical. And you know what's interesting? I think there's so many people that come from a business building perspective, a brand building perspective, a message development perspective, is like, man, this is what God told me to say, but I'm trying to go to the masses. right?
Yep.
And how do I create something that is still God honoring, and yet I can still have an invitation into these other elements that you otherwise wouldn't get that invitation into? Whether it, I know you had a lot of background in sports arena, some, and thankfully a lot are now becoming very faith forward in the way that they're showing up. But I think that there are some people who are very anointed to be able to have that duality. And then I also think there are some who are meant to truly just say what the word is saying. And they're like meant to cut with that knife of, I'm sorry that I might create division in what I'm about to say, but this is very powerful time to do that without feeling a condemning or a shame-filled or a guilty way, because people are looking for truth. And
Yep.
so when you're presenting this, and let's get into the subtitle here because this is truth, right? Is the need for redefining health is not just something that the secular world needs. This is the church, the body of Christ is literally dilapidated and unhealthy. And they
Yep.
take that one scripture of like, your body is a vessel, and they think that's it. They're like, oh, okay, that's done. I, had my 8 cups of water today, which nobody actually does, right? And then there's the life by design, and then there's break the relentless pursuit of normal. So let's go into some of that and like chew on it a bit.
Yeah, when I first built Own It, in terms of this download, and even just the way that Own It came about, a 30-second story. I had left the NHL in 2020. There was about 8 months of I'd heard the Lord say, "It's time to stop serving the audience you want to and start serving the audience I called you to." At 12, was called to redeem the health of the world, and as I stepped out in 2020, there was 8 months of like just wilderness, like true wilderness, Tamara, like where I couldn't I couldn't hold a job. I got fired twice, of just
Which
going
doesn't
and
make sense.
stepping into like a performance center and stepping into this gym with celebrities, training people like Justin Bieber and Hailey Bieber and Sarah Jessica Parker and Hugh Jackman and all of these people that like everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You went from the NHL to this, like this is awesome. And I'm like, no, this sucks. I hate it. And then COVID hit, and so now like I'm not doing anything, and I like, God, I left the NHL to do what it is that you called me to, but I'm sitting here with nothing. And so I sat in this kayak. It was literally, I was looking back at photos yesterday. It was April 22nd of 2020, and I was paddling a kayak, and all I could see was this big sheet of what I would call glass or ice, and there was this bullet hole in it. Instead of picking up my phone and ignoring and distracting myself, it was almost like I leaned in, like,
Mm.
what is this? And there was a spider web, and it broke and it fell, and that was the first download I got for Own It, and wrote it all on my phone. Went in, ended up being like a 23-page manifesto of what it actually was.
Wow.
And that was that initial download of like what Own It was for truly redeeming the health of the world, and the process and the system and the philosophy and how everything integrated together, from coaching to testing to quantifiable metrics to data, and bringing it in a very holistic, true, and powerful, personalized way. And so I tell you that story because when we talk about redeeming the health of the world, our business and this book was built on the framework and the principle of Romans 12 verse 1 and 2, which people often just hear the one thing is, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but rather be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This will test what God's true perfect will is. Well, you hear, when you read that, it's like, oh, give your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. Okay, great. We've heard it 99 times before, right?
Yep.
And like, where do we lean in? Where do we actually go? But when I actually stepped back and I sat on this, it was the 7 words of, this is your true and proper worship. Like, this literally, it gives me goosebumps. This is your true and proper worship. He loves it when we get into the church. He loves it when we throw our hands up. He loves it when we sing. He loves it when we get in the word. He loves it when we're kind. But how are you living? Like, how are you actually living? How are you stewarding this thing that you've been given? God calls our bodies the greatest creation, human beings, man and woman, the greatest creation that he ever made. And how are we stewarding that? It's the only thing in this world that carries the Holy Spirit, the only thing that's anointed with this. Yet, how are we living? What are we doing? It's not the diet that you need to be on. It's not the workout routine you need to be on. It's not what Instagram influencer A, B, C, D, E, F, or G is doing. It's not about what does your neighbor do or what does your coworker do, but what do you need? What does your body need? What does your body require? What is your body asking of you today so that we can ultimately lean into something new and something different? And so when I think about redeeming the health of the world, living life by design, and then going to this last component of ultimately getting away from the relentless pursuit of normal, the world tells us what normal is. And if you actually dive into what normal has become, is normal is that 71%, the leading cause of death in the United States, is chronic illness. 95% of those which are preventable through lifestyle habit and behavior change.
Holy
And so
moly.
for us, our mission is to equip, educate, and empower people to take ownership of their health by ultimately redeeming the health of the world through taking that chronic illness state from 71% down below 50% by the year 2030. And in doing this, that is where this comes from. That is where it goes from. It's not that we're going to give you the best workout routine. We're not going to give you the best supplement. We're not going to give you the best diet plan, the best sleep blanket. We're going to ultimately say, what is the best thing for Tamara?
Yeah.
And use data, use testing, use personalized processes that Tamara truly gets an N of one solution, truly gets an N of one solution that now she gets her hand held along the way that's going to educate you, that's going to equip you, that's going to empower you. So you no longer are at the mercy of a person, place, or thing to tell you that you're healthy, to tell you that you're on the right track, to tell you that your body's operating optimally. Because here's the thing, Tamara, and I'm so bullish on this, is we're so quick to say the medical system's off, the medical system's wrong,
Right.
the medical system isn't doing its job.
Yeah.
Well, I actually go very contrarian to that, and I think the medical system's doing a phenomenal job. Why? Because it was designed for two things. Number one, to fix things that were broken. If I have a foot facing the opposite direction, take me to my medical team.
Yeah.
If I have an appendix that's about to burst,
Yeah.
take me to my medical team.
Yeah.
And make money. Those are the two things it was built to do, the two things it was designed to do. And it's doing those things very well.
Yeah.
But we as humans, we want it to prevent our illness for us. We want it to maintain our health. We want it to keep us optimal. Well, friends, that's not what it was designed for.
That's good.
That's not their job. That's our job.
That's so good,
But-
Justin.
But yet we don't know the data about our body. We don't know the information. We don't know how we're handling stress. We don't know how well we're sleeping. We don't know what our deficiencies are. And so if we don't know these things and are just okay keeping our head in the sand, and then all of a sudden we pick our head up and the medical system takes a jump the moment we break, how can we be upset with that?
Yeah.
And that's where this comes back to, is how are you living? How are you treating this thing that God's given you and anointed you with to go do something great, to go lead his people, to go be this vessel of something amazing? But yet, if we go to the four concepts of stewardship I talk about, one, we own nothing. God owns everything. Number two, we have the ability to grow, but we also have the ability to squander what we've been given. Number three, if we squander what we have been given, do not expect further blessings and further receival of greater responsibility. And number four, you can be called into accountability at any time. And so knowing these things, how are you living, and where do we need to see this revolution, this change, so that we can realize different outcomes?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think you guys have to go back to the simple word that is the most profound on the entire cover, right? But it's the ownership piece. And if we're constantly in that blame shifting, which has become the normal, right? It's so much easier for people to go out and blame the food industry,
Yep.
blame
Yep.
big pharma, blame the education system, blame the political system, blame everyone else. And I'm not saying those things don't have a culprit, right? Like, I'm all in on that conversation too. However, I have to raise my hand first. I mean, even when Gary and I were walking through way crazy marital situations that I could have pointed the finger, and I tried to many, many times, it ultimately came back to like, well, where is my play?
Yeah.
And so, if we aren't in the process of owning day in and day out this journey, this gift, that's the stewardship piece, then all of the other elements to our life become shambles. And that's where people are when they get to that place of shame, they get to that place of resentment, they get to that place of diagnoses, right? And they're like, oh, how could this possibly happen to me? And you're like,
Yep.
how have you been living the last
Mm-hmm.
20 years? How have you been living the last 30 years? And some of that wasn't our fault. We can't own it to going grocery shopping when my kids are 9 and 10. Like, that's not on them. That is on me from a stewardship perspective as a parent. But I also have to be in the training up now season of that. And so we can't do any of that without knowledge, right? Without wisdom, the people will perish. And it's
Yep.
the lack of knowledge, which is this very thing of data, metrics. Like, our health classes didn't teach us enough, right?
Yeah.
So at this point, getting their hands on this book, like, what is your hope in the transformation of somebody going from, okay, I'm going to pick up this book, I don't know this guy Justin, or I know this guy Dave Meltzer who wrote the foreword, who's been on the show too, we love him, and like, to the time they're done, what is your hope on the other side of the book?
So I often say I have two things. I have a hope and then I have a promise. So my hope is that you feel empowered and equipped to understand what's going on in your body in a completely different way. What you're going to get out of this book in that hope is this is not another protocol. This is not another system. This is not another diet. This is not another workout program. This is not another uh, how to build a habit component,
Yeah.
although there is
Yeah.
some of that in there. It's truly a framework that allows you to go, oh, wow, this is what is important in terms of a data standpoint that I need to know about my body, simply from heart rate variability and sleep quality. And I'll get into these three things: heart rate variability, sleep quality, and cellular deficiency. If we can understand these three things, we can ultimately increase the average lifespan of a human being by 15 years. Harvard just came out with a study. It's incredible.
Wow.
And really being able to lean into this and understand it. But a lot of books that come out in the health space, the only books I've seen that come out in the health space, and the arguments that are happening on social media, you see it all the time, is this is better. No, this is better. No, this is better. No, this is better. And the arguments that the health experts, like the people that we're turning towards, the biggest name in health right now, are saying this is better. Well, why is this better? Because you're making money off of it. That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Because you have a system, or you have an affiliation, or you have are getting paid somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
That's why it's better.
Yeah.
It's not because it's better for Tamara. It's
so
not
good.
because it's better for Justin. It's not because it's better for Susie, Stacy, Kelly, Tyler, or Peter. Like,
Yeah.
we have to understand what is better for me. And the only way we can dissociate and discern that is if we have information and knowledge. And so
So
that's
good.
my hope, is that people leave this and understand that. My promise is that I made it simple. I took the complexity of health, and I'll get into a couple of these complexities here in a second and talk about the story. But I took the complexities that are there and made them simple and digestible and usable and practical and personal. So you are going to leave here and you're going to feel truly empowered. You're not going to feel like, oh my gosh, now I got to go and hire somebody to figure this out. Like, no, you will literally have everything that you need here. So let me back up a little bit. When we think about our peak in lifespan, how long are we living? We peaked at 2014, the highest that we've ever, average lifespan that we've ever lived, 79.4. That's what we peaked at back in 2014. So don't blame COVID. Don't blame any of these other things. Look in the mirror. Yes, going back to what you said, yes, there's environmental things. Yes, there's things with our food chain. Yes, all of these things have an impact. But the thing is, you don't realize the impact they've actually had because you don't realize the data in which it's going on. And so you're just riding a train to nowhere.
Good.
And so when we get onto this, we see that over the last decade, we've seen a statistical decline year after year in the average lifespan, to where today the average lifespan of a male is 72.6 and the average lifespan of a female is 77.3.
Wow.
We've gotten to a point where literally 7 years, if you were just take the average person, not entrepreneurs, not people who
Yeah.
are constantly like doing things, the average person, 7 years after somebody retires, they're no longer with us. Imagine that for a second. We've continually seen the decline. Well, Harvard came out with a study and said, hey, if we do these five things, increase the average sleep quality of a human being, increase VO2 max, increase ability to control blood glucose, increase average HRV, and minimize cellular deficiencies, we can increase the lifespan of a human being by up to 15 years on average. So that's 72.3
Yep.
that we're having for males. Now all of a sudden it becomes 87.3.
Oh my gosh. That's
Who's
like a
in
whole almost generation that you would get to see. Like, that's crazy.
who's in for that?
Yeah. That's
Females are living
amazing.
into their 90s.
Yeah. Wow.
And the crazy part is it's not Ozempic.
Yeah.
It's not peptides. It's not testosterone. It's not hormone therapies. It's not these injectables. It's not these man-made creations. It's how are you living? It's living a life by design. It's living something that's purposeful, intentional, and meaning something for you based off the season of life you're in, the priorities you have, and what you're ultimately searching for. I'm not sitting here saying you got to go spend $9,000 a month on groceries. That's somebody who would probably have some type of investment in that grocery chain. I don't have any of those things. I want to empower you. If you have $1 to spend or you have $100,000 to spend, I want you to be equipped and empowered to be able to step in and take ownership of your health and know what to do differently, so that if you can do something different, you can realize different outcomes. And that's what I'm leaning in for and where I want to go with this book. And that was my promise, is all five of those areas that I talked about. And then hopefully we'll touch on a couple of them to give some context as to what it
Yeah.
is. But those five areas, as crazy and complex and science derived and unique as they are, they're simple, they're easy to understand, and you leave this book going, dang, I can do this. I actually am not broken. The symptoms I'm feeling are not my death sentence. The symptoms I'm feeling are not normal. The symptoms I'm feeling are not where I have to be. The symptoms I'm feeling aren't where I have to live. I'm exhausted with all of the worldly solutions. Well, now this is your different approach to health, because for the first time, you're going to be able to dictate whether you're healthy or not. You're going to be able to understand whether you're going in the right direction or not, because you're not using some random person's test. You're not using your medical system that's only looking if something's broken. And just because something's broken does not mean everything's right.
Yeah, that's so incredible. And there's like this identity piece, I think, when I mention like the church at large or people at large, like there are so many people who are dealing with chronic pain. I was in a prayer circle literally last night, hands laid on a girlfriend who just has been dealing with chronic pain, and she's trying everything. And there's this conversation about, oh, it's the enemy, right? And I steward that conversation lightly, because I do think that there are enemy tactics connected to a lot of what we were talking about, as could potentially be a culprit to a predicament that we find ourselves in. But it still goes back to ownership, because even if the enemy is at play, that means at some point you've raised your hand, you've allowed access to yourself, to your body, the very vessel that literally a demon-possessed person has opened themselves up to say, yeah, I'm going to receive that. Or they've taken it on as their identity, and so they're walking in that place. And so to breathe fresh wind into somebody's life and to extract this pain, this chronic pain from someone's life, to just wake up and feel good, a lot of people don't even know what that is. They don't even know. They're just walking through, well, I have these leg pains, I have these knee pains, I have this mental fogginess, I'm always tired, right? And like, That saddens me for people. It saddens me. And so to have access to this is essentially a life guide, you guys, to say, here you go, couple this with the truth, which it's where it's derived from. You can tell this just in the 5-day window of saying, it's not my message anymore. Like, this is God's message through Justin. So these 5 simple things that you're talking about, let's dive into them so that people can at least have a quick access point, and then they can get the book and you guys can do what you're supposed to do and read it.
Yeah, it's I'll just add something before you go, because
Yeah.
like I've got to gather myself here, because
Uh,
I just started tearing up and crying, because
yeah.
at the end of the day, when you feel good, like, you have life. And there's so many people that go along life just feeling hopeless,
Yeah.
like feeling hopeless that I will ever feel good, feeling hopeless that I can actually step into this, feeling hopeless that whatever I've been dealing with, I can actually overcome. And the doctors just give me diagnoses saying, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what it is. Throw this pill at it, throw that pill at it.
Yeah.
I've tried all the courses. I've tried all the magic potions, lotions, and
Yeah.
spells that everybody else is pushing. But when it comes back to it, like, I was that person. I was that person that didn't know how to get healthy. Even though on the outside I looked it. I was running triathlons. I was winning world championships. I was a professional athlete. I was doing all these things. I had the muscles, I had the looks, I had all the things. But inside I was dying. Literally dying, and I knew it and I felt it, and everybody told me that it was normal. And at the end of the day, when I finally went and got my own testing done and realized that those numbers are not normal and something else is going on and people need to help me
Yeah.
figure it out, they ultimately found 4 precancerous polyps in my colon and an ulcer that was precancerous in my stomach, that the doctor said to me is, if you hadn't kept pushing, you wouldn't have seen your 35th birthday.
Wow.
And that to me, like, that to me is just unacceptable, that we accept this as normal.
Yeah. Mm.
And that's where the passion comes from, knowing that this can be hope for the hopeless.
Yeah.
This can be something different, something unique that ultimately gives you the power back.
Well, and I think about like all the way back to the Exodus time frame, right? And like them living to 100, 120 years. And like you don't ever hear, unless it was a plague that was sent by God, you don't ever hear them talking about sickness or like the generation died because they just couldn't walk. They couldn't continue to be in the wilderness. They couldn't go through the fire. That actually wasn't true. They were actually really healthy and they were living off of manna, which is like a little bit, right? It was a little bit, but it was enough. And I think that that is an element of this normalcy, this pursuit of normal has been this abundance. I need more, I need more, I need more. And it's like, actually, like, let's strip it back and let's come back to the basics, which I also think is what this is about. It's like you can get rid of all of those other things and live life fully without all of the added supplements, if you will. Not to say
Totally.
supplements are bad, because I think there are really great things. We're all on them.
Totally. And to that point, it now gives us like the simple components, right? So
Yep.
we break it down to these 5 things. Number one, if you don't know, if I'm sitting here and I'm talking about sleep quality and you don't know your quality of sleep every night, meaning the 4 stages that we sleep in, you have a light sleep cycle, a slow wave sleep cycle, a REM sleep cycle, and a wake cycle. It takes approximately 90 to 120 minutes to go through those 4 stages for any single person. If you're not sleeping for 50%, 40 to 50% of every single night, whether you sleep 6 hours a night or whether you sleep 9 hours a night, 40 to 50% in those middle 2 stages, REM and slow wave sleep, your quality is lower than it should be.
Mm.
Your quality is lower than it should be. I don't care if you're sleeping 8 hours a night, but if you're sleeping 8 hours a night and you're getting 25% sleep quality, you're missing out on 2 hours every single night of high quality sleep that allows for brain toxicity release, repair of the physical body, repair of the mental capabilities, memory storage,
Wow.
all of these things that are going on. You've got a lymphatic system that's 80% more active at night than it is at any other point in time during the day, which is ultimately why People who don't get great sleep are at increased risk for Alzheimer's. Type 3 diabetes is what it's actually called. So, an inability to control blood sugar. All of these things come back into play.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting here going, Justin, how did you sleep last night? Good. How do you know? How do
Yeah.
you know? And it's not just about another sleep supplement. It's not just about another weighted blankets. It's not about that sleep mask. It's not about that mouth tape. It's not about those blackout sheets. It's not like none of these things. Those can be tools that help,
Right.
but how do you know if they're helping? How do you know if what you're doing is working? Only if you're tracking and understanding sleep quality, which
Wow.
takes us to number 2, which is heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is what I did all of my postgraduate research in. What we found was that it is the universal language to how your body is adapting to stress and strain. And so a higher HRV means that your body is more able to take on stress and strain, meaning mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, real, perceived, positive, negative. Your body does not know the difference between all of these forms of stressors. And the response of the body, because it's just programmed to keep us
Yeah.
alive,
Yeah.
you can be thinking about a stressor. You can be in a fight with your spouse. You could be doing a very hard workout. You could be sending your kids off to college. You could be figuring out what your purpose is. You could be at ends with God. Like whatever these things are, they are stressors that your body has to deal with, which ultimately we don't have a metric or barometer to understand how that is. And so we can be under stress and not feel stress. I'll say this again. You can be under stress, but not feel stress. And this is the first time that we have a quantifiable metric to be able to say, hey, how is your body handling what it is you're doing? How is your design of life positively or negatively impacting you?
Wow.
And so when we can realize that now we have something to measure sleep quality, we have something to measure how our body's handling stress and strain, heart rate variability, higher, better, lower is an alert. We then go into number 3, which is cellular deficiencies. And cellular deficiencies are ultimately created at the cellular level, vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, the foundational building blocks to building muscle, to making sure bone structure is healthy, to creating repair, to creating mental clarity, to making sure we get quality sleep, to make sure that we can handle the stress. Higher stressful times, more vitamins, minerals, amino acids are pulled from the cells. If they're not available, increases stress on the body, and it's a downward cyclical effect. Chronic stress creates chronic deficiencies, creates chronic symptoms, symptoms we consider normal, and those symptoms create chronic illness.
Wow.
That's literally the pattern. So if we can interrupt chronic stress, understanding now quantifiably what we're going after and what we're having, we can then interrupt cellular deficiencies, understanding what we're cellularly deficient in, and then not just supplement for that, but create custom formulated supplementation, something unique to us, and then having custom personalized nutrition guidance, not plans, because as soon as we get that plan, it's obsolete anyways because our life changes.
Right.
It's what can we guide ourselves on from a vitamin, mineral, and amino acid standpoint. That's how we ultimately keep going. And then we retest. We see, is it working? Is it not working? Do we have to change it? And that's the cycle. That's how we ultimately end up getting further. And so chronic symptoms create chronic illness. We can ultimately interrupt that even before we get down to that level. And then number 4, increased VO2 max, which is basically how your body utilizes oxygen.
Right.
So making sure that we're physically fit, and we can do that by simply looking at our max heart rate. So go and take a look at something that's tracked max heart rate in the last year. I don't want an estimated max heart rate, something that's tracked max heart rate. Divide that by your resting heart rate and then multiply it by 15.3. If you're a female and it's not above 38 and a male and it's not above 45, you've got some work to do
You need to
because your
move.
body is not optimized. And
Wow.
then number 5 is steady blood glucose, is making sure that what we use, how we're operating, is also going to regulate blood glucose and blood sugar, and we can do that while we do that same test for cellular deficiencies.
Okay, you guys have to know that as much as I know Justin for nearly 3 years, I'm learning something new. Some of this is completely over my head. So if you're listening and you're like, what? That feels like a lot. It's in a book and it's easily accessible through people like Justin. And so I don't want anyone to just stay stagnant because language doesn't meet you. It's just like if somebody's talking Christianese and you're like, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what that means. I'm going to go this way. This is life altering. This
Life
is
altering.
15 more years of your life with your children, with your grandbabies, with your spouse. Like, yes, please. And it really, that last part that is in bold, break the relentless pursuit of normal. Like, I'm so in on that movement, like raising my hand, taking ownership, and actually changing some of the things that I know. Like, my sleep cycles are based on my sleep number bed, right? And like it telling me what I'm doing and what I'm not. And I have a puppy right now. So that's been really fun because it's being broken all the time with potty training, right? And so this is a stress. That would be an added stress that would be affecting my numbers, but I don't even know some of these other things. So I couldn't even tell you what chronic illness is growing or happening that I'm unaware of because of environmental and situational things, because I'm not in tune with all of these things. So don't feel guilty if this is new information, and it's actually just an invitation. That's what the book is. It's an invitation for you to be a part of a movement that is going to make us partying a lot longer together. Of course, Holy Spirit partnering and partnering. But I want you to talk about that too, Justin, because I know that this book is like a cue up for the other two books that you mentioned came out of this session with the Lord right before you submitted it. So give us just the tee up so when I bring you back on in a year or two, we're like, wow, this is so crazy. God is so good.
I I will as soon as I talk to that one thing that you said, because
Okay.
it's so good what you just added.
Okay.
What I just talked about, we're not shooting for perfection.
Yeah.
We're not giving you something that you, oh my gosh, I have to be here. You just got a puppy.
Yeah.
Your sleep cycle is not going to be optimal for the season
Yeah.
that you're in. Maybe you're a single mom. There's a season that you're in that's going to be difficult, that you need to enhance in certain areas. And there's going to be certain priorities that we need to target to give you capacity to make sure you can handle that. Maybe you're in a season where everything's awesome. Everything's easily routined. Everything's easily set up. Well, what if we were able to optimize those things and not waste that season so that you had capacity when all of a sudden you do have a puppy come in and is interrupting your time in which you're getting into bed. But now that you know that you're not getting the best night's sleeps, what can you do to combat that on the other side,
That's
that
good.
you're no longer just wondering, but you're empowered with that information so that you can lean in a really powerful way? So that's what I want people to understand too, is this is not a book where you're going to be like, oh my gosh, now I feel guilty because I can't live a perfect life. No, there's
Yeah.
no perfection.
Right.
Optimization is not the pursuit of perfect, it's the pursuit of better. And if we can stay in that space, that's going to allow us to really move in that direction really powerfully.
I love that.
So going back to your question, from that book, from where I was, it ultimately created the next layer for me, which is holy health. And what holy health is it's a 3-month journey of devotionals along with a single controllable. I call these 8 controllables. So exercise, nutrition, hydration, sleep, mindset, self-care, environment, and immune function, and taking you on this journey. And so over the course of those 3 months, you're going to be adding different habits that are based around you, the season you're in, what's priority to you, and your data that guides you and literally walks you through those steps, so that at the end of 3 months, you have theoretically a whole new life by design structure that you've been able to actually encapsulate and move forward in a powerful way.
I am like so blown away because it's such a divine download. Like, I listen to a lot of people. I hear a lot of people, all the gurus that you're talking about. Yeah, I'm like, oh, now I need to get homemade kefir. And oh, I can have sourdough bread. Oh, I thought I couldn't have, right? Like, I know all of these people. And so this feels so freeing because it's for me. right?
Mm-hmm.
And like that's what's so cool about having intimate relationship with God is that it's your relationship. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot you can explain it away, but somebody else is going to have to walk through that individually for them to have that exchange and that experience. And so
Very good.
I'm excited that this is giving them that opportunity. You guys can get the book now, today, on all of the different platforms, wherever you love to buy books best, and be a part of this movement. And if you're looking for deeper information, it's not, if you're, and especially if you're a woman and you're like, I'm not an NHL, athlete, any of those things. Elise, his wife, is incredible. And you can go to ownitcoaching.com today. They have a plethora of options, even for married couples, if you want to do this alongside your spouse. For business owners and leaders, I know there's a huge population listening to the show now. And you're like, yeah, that's me. We have so many stressors we're under, y'all. Parents, anyone, no one is excluded from this invitation. And I love that best, is that it's an open invitation for everybody to come and get well. Like, not only well physically and mentally, spiritually, you're going to get well in the process with some of the additional additives that you're going to give us, because it's access to deeper awareness of God. When you have all this fogginess, it's really hard to get clear. And that's the number one thing I hear from Christians is I don't have clarity over what my purpose is. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're chronically in pain. How do you have clarity if you're in pain all the time? You're not sleeping well. So I think that there's so many unlocks for both secular and faith. God did it well when he put this together and had you rework it and say, this is the message, because there is no one excluded from it.
Yeah, it's just so exciting to be able to see that this can resonate with people and change the game. And just based on even what you said, it's personal to you. Just as your relationship with God is personal to you, so is this journey that you're going on. So is this journey of health. And when you try to live out somebody else's prayer life, when you try to live out somebody else's hearing God story, when you try to live out somebody else's purpose, think about how frustrating that is. Think about how destructive that is. Think about how disappointing and discouraging that is, because you're never going to realize the potential in which God has ultimately prepared for you. And that, for me, is why this comes back to like the truth, why it's different, why it's unique, why it's simple. And by simply being able to lean in, say, hey, this is something that is going to change my life. This is something that is going to empower me, so that you can ultimately live differently and experience life differently.
Man, Justin, so good. I am prayerful over just the expansion of this message. And it's not just a national, it's a global need. It's a global movement. And it's pretty incredible that I get to be at like the beginning seed stages of it all. So I'm grateful to be friends and to catalyze it however I can. Thank you for being here. Are there any final messages you want to let anybody know about? I feel like this was so rich.
The biggest thing that I just want to tell people is that they're not broken. You are not broken. You may be at your wit's end. You may be hopeless. But at the end of the day, realize that 99% of people feel like they're hopeless, but that 1% is God. That 1% is there. And by doing something different, by realizing something different, by having that next step, like, this is your 1%. This is God talking to you. This is your opportunity to leave in and realize that, hey, there's something different for you. There's something different available.
So good. So good. I hope you find peace in that final message, you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and go get the book today, The Power of Ownership by Justin Roethlingshoefer. Available everywhere. Bye, y'all.